The rise of the United States over the past few centuries is often described as a miracle, but in reality, it was a combination of geography, timing, resources, and an ideology that reshaped the modern world. When the first European settlers arrived on the continent, they found vast land, abundant natural resources, and two oceans that provided protection from the conflicts of Europe. This geographic advantage allowed the early colonies to develop without constant invasion or destruction, something that shaped the nation's confidence and expansionist mindset. The American Revolution later turned these colonies into an experiment in self-governance, powered by a belief that individuals, not monarchs, should control their own destiny. This idea, radical for its time, became one of the foundations of the country's rapid development. The 19th century accelerated America's rise. The Louisiana Purchase doubled its territory, while westward expansion unlocked farmland, minerals, and trade routes. The Industrial Revolution transformed the United States from a farming society into a manufacturing powerhouse. Massive immigration delivered millions of workers who built railroads, factories, and entire cities. The combination of cheap land, high wages, and expanding markets created an economic momentum that few nations could match. However, the rapid growth also intensified contradictions within the country. The issue of slavery split the nation and resulted in the Civil War, the bloodiest conflict in American history. But after the war, the country rebuilt quickly, and the abolition of slavery forced the United States to modernize its labor systems and industrial organization. By the late 1800s, America was emerging as a global industrial giant. Companies such as Standard Oil, Carnegie Steel, and later Ford Motor Company represented a new kind of large-scale corporate capitalism that reshaped global production. Railroads connected the continent, turning the United States into the world's largest integrated market. A culture of innovation, combined with patent protection and access to massive domestic demand, encouraged inventors like Edison, Bell, and later the Wright brothers. American culture began to embrace the idea that progress was not merely possible, it was inevitable. This belief powered scientific advances and economic expansion. What made the United States different from other rising powers was its ability to combine economic growth with a narrative of freedom and opportunity. Millions of immigrants viewed America as a place where anyone could rebuild their lives regardless of their origins. This inflow of talent diversified the country and kept its population growing even as Europe's empires struggled with stagnation. By the early 20th century, America's industrial capacity, financial strength, and growing cultural influence positioned it to shape the modern world. Yet the defining moment came with the World Wars. When Europe destroyed itself, the United States stepped in as the only major nation with intact infrastructure and expanding industry. This shift permanently altered the global balance of power. By the end of World War II, the United States had become the world's leading economy, its largest creditor, and the architect of the new international order. The dollar became the world's reserve currency, and American institutions shaped global trade, finance, and security. What appeared to be a sudden rise was actually the culmination of centuries of geographic blessings, ideological innovation, economic expansion, and global timing. It was not an accident, but the result of structural advantages that allowed the United States to achieve what many nations attempted but few sustained, becoming a world power while defining the modern era. After World War II, the United States consolidated its position as the most influential nation in history. Its industrial base was unmatched, its scientific community led global innovation, and its military power projected influence across continents. The establishment of institutions like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank reflected America's ability to shape global governance, using both economic leverage and diplomatic strategy. The Marshall Plan rebuilt war-torn Europe, simultaneously opening markets for American goods and ensuring political stability aligned with U.S. interests. In Asia, military and economic strategies during the Cold War extended American influence further, creating alliances that remain central to global geopolitics today. The domestic factors behind this success were equally important. Public education, the GI Bill, and policies supporting home ownership created a highly skilled, mobile, and productive population. The post-war baby boom expanded the labor force and stimulated demand for goods and services, fueling decades of economic growth. Corporations innovated rapidly, producing consumer goods that transformed lifestyles and cemented America's cultural influence worldwide. At the same time, a strong legal framework protected property rights, encouraged entrepreneurship, and provided the stability necessary for long-term investment. These domestic structures allowed the United States not only to recover from global crises, but to exploit them as opportunities to expand wealth, technology, and influence. Technology played a decisive role in America's rise. From electricity and automobiles to aerospace and computing, innovation was intertwined with education, research institutions, and public-private partnerships. The space race demonstrated not only technical prowess, but the ability to mobilize national resources toward a shared objective, reinforcing America's global image as the leader of progress. Similarly, advances in communications, finance, and media amplified the country's cultural and economic influence, exporting values, products, and ideas across the world. The combination of innovation, human capital, and institutional stability created a feedback loop. Success generated resources that fueled further growth, creating a cycle that reinforced American dominance. Even during periods of social upheaval, the civil rights movement, economic recessions, or political scandals, the nation's underlying structures allowed it to adapt without losing its global position. The United States became a model of resilience, demonstrating that economic, technological, and cultural strength, when combined with a coherent national narrative, could sustain supremacy over centuries. Its miracle was therefore not only material but ideological. It was the ability to integrate diverse populations, adapt institutions, and mobilize innovation while maintaining a shared belief in progress, freedom, and opportunity. Today, the story of America's rise offers lessons on how geography, institutions, culture, and timing interact to create a dominant power. The U.S. did not merely become rich or powerful. It became the reference point for modernity, influencing global norms, economics, and politics. Its history shows that the creation of human civilization's most influential nation requires long-term vision, adaptability, and a willingness to combine internal strength with global engagement. What looks like a miracle from the outside is, in truth, the outcome of centuries of planning, innovation, and resilience, illustrating how a nation can rise from modest beginnings to define the course of human history.